She's cross-appointed to the Center of Medieval Studies at Wordsworth College. Her current project, Technologies of Unknowing, is a study of medieval wonders in digital environments. She holds a PhD, in Medieval Studies and BSc Computer Science, University of Toronto. Her research interests include digital humanities, Old and Middle English narrative, marvels, monsters, and imaginary geographies. So, Professor Bolintineanu.
Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. Thank you so much for coming. The title of my talk today is Building Digital Collections, Sherlock Holmes, Omeka, and Neatline. Sherlock Holmes is going to come in a moment. Today I want to talk to you basically about two tools, Omeka and Neatline. Omeka, a tool for digital collections, Neatline, a tool for mapping those very same digital collections. Just to get, thank you. Folks at the back, do I need the mic? Is this better? Yes, okay. So Omeka, as I said, is a tool for digital collections. Neatline is a tool for digital mapping that allows you to take a digital archive and tell stories with it in time and space. Just to get a sense of the room, how many of you are familiar with Omeka? All right, fantastic. How many of you have worked with Neatline? All right, then I'm going to do a brief overview of Omeka, and from there we're going to pass to Neatline and the Sherlock Holmes portion of my talk. Omeka has been called WordPress for museums. It's a content management system that allows users to build digital archives of books, images, recordings, performances, many other kinds of items. The beautiful thing about it is that it's free, it's open source, and it has really wide community uptake. So there are many, many people in the digital humanities community that use Omeka as a teaching tool or even as a lightweight way to manage their digital collections. Omeka allows users to curate collections of digital items, images, audio, videos, performances, lesson plans, whatever you like. You can also take these items and build exhibits. Exhibits function as guided tours through your digital collection. Users can arrange the items from their collections into multimedia essays using the Lego bricks of the archive to tell stories. And here I'm showing you a couple of samples of beautiful projects, pedagogical projects done with Omeka. All of them rely on digital collections. Whether it's the Martha Berry Archive, where librarians collaborated with faculty and with students to digitize a rare collection, take the images, catalog them, and then put them online with Omeka, or a history of Daisy Miller Helyar, all kinds of public history projects where students went out into the community and took photographs, interviewed people. So there's a wide range of projects that can be done with Omeka. Now, I'm going to have to set down the mic because I'm passing to the demo part of my talk. There we go. Show you the kind of work that I'm currently doing with Omeka in my Digital Humanities 101 class. Spatial Humanities. A quick introduction to this project. In my DH 101 class, I wanted my students to come away with a couple of skills. The first one is I wanted them, these are first-year students, so I wanted them to be able to navigate a digital archive. I wanted them to understand concepts like metadata, and I wanted them to understand that good citation is not just a way of staying on the windy side of the law, but it's also a way of participating in a larger scholarly collaboration, larger scholarly conversation. So that was one goal, navigating archives. Another goal was to get them to read literary texts quite closely. with an eye to detail. And my third goal was to get them to give spatial form to a scholarly argument. Specifically, what I asked them to do was to pick a Sherlock Holmes story from a list I gave them and map the story on a map of London. They were supposed to have about 5 points of interest on this map. They were supposed to follow a character walking across the map, have about 5 points of interest, and to each point, they were supposed to attach an item that was of historical significance. Whether a piece of a 19th century map, a 19th century account of a particular building, 19th century photographs or paintings that would be relevant to that particular location. My students are still working on their projects, so I will show you the sample that I built for them. And this will give me the opportunity of demonstrating the Omeka to meet line workflow as well. All right, so I started off with a map. Neatline is a plugin for Omeka. Neatline is a software package that allows Omeka to display archives in time and space. If you have a hosted installation of Omeka, so if your own institution hosts Omeka, they would be able to add the Neatline plugin. So here's Neatline. And in Neatline, you can create an exhibit. An exhibit is a blank map onto which you add points and annotations. So I create an exhibit. I'm going to title it Demo. Neatline and Omeka, in their philosophy, are very much about humanities kinds of knowledge, humanities scholarship. So unlike visualization tools that come from a science background, Neatline and Omeka privilege close reading, careful interaction with the careful and personal interaction with the details of a text or of an artifact. Let me show you what I mean by that. First, the exhibit includes a narrative. This is where you can put your scholarly argument. This comes from the understanding of the makers of the software that visualization is well and good, but it should come within the framework of a digital project. You can select different widgets for your Neatline exhibit. Widgets are things that enable you to carry out tasks. You could select a timeline if you wished, so that you can put items on a timeline, or waypoints that allow you to pull up a menu of your annotations on the map. Let's do that. And then you can select a spatial layer. That is the map, the default map that Neatline opens up with. I personally like OpenStreetMap. And I'm going to save my exhibit. All right. When I go into the map, I'm faced with two panes. On this side is a map, and at the top I have buttons for navigation. The top one allows me to move in all directions. The one below allows me to zoom in and out. And here's an important thing. Unlike Google Maps, for example, which is searchable, you can put the name of a place and it will give you an exact location. In Neatline, you have to do this stuff manually. If you're interested in a city, you have to find it on the map yourself by dragging the map around. Again, very much part of this philosophy of digital data visualization as a process where we have to make the interpretation, the process of interpretation visible. All right, so suppose I want to go to Toronto. Oh no, New York is nice and visible. Okay, let's go to New York where it's good and snowy. I'm going to make a new record. The slug is just what gets appended at the end of the URL to identify this particular annotation on the map. Snow, Today, New York is full of snow. All right, and now I get to map this item. Again, I'm encouraged to interact with the map closely and manually. I'm going to draw a point and scroll down. What selects the point is my manual interaction. This gives me a geometry collection. Unlike other mapping applications where you import a bunch of location data in table form, in Neatline you generate all of this yourself manually. All right. We're going to save this spot. Okay, so now on the map, you have a record telling us that today New York is full of snow. Where does the archive part come in? Every Omeka site holds a bunch of items. If you think of the books in the library catalog, each one of them has a record in the online catalog. Similarly, each item has an Omeka record called an item. So, Neatline allows me to take those items and place them on the map, like so. I go to the item, and I find the item that I like in my collection. Is there the severed thumb? Here we go, the cut off thumb. My students are working on a Sherlock Holmes story that involves an engineer who has had his thumb chopped off. So we are going to add, I'm afraid, the cut off thumb to New York. Here you go. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. You can just see him holding a bandage. And the image in the collection is an illustration from the Strand, the journal, or rather the magazine, the serial magazine where the Sherlock Holmes stories were first published. Okay, I'm going to save it. And now, if I go to New York, I'm able to see my own commentary that today New York is full of snow, as well as the record, the archival record associated with that location. Any questions so far? Usually I run this tutorial as a much more hands-on kind of event. But because I have you here, I will take advantage and show you what finished exhibits look like. Bless you. These are my students' exhibits. And this is the exhibit that I made for them to use as a potential model, though I suspect a lot of them are going to create things much prettier than mine. Okay. So my story is a story about Hattie Doran, who is this young woman. She marries a very rich lord in London, goes to the wedding breakfast, and from there disappears without a trace, and Sherlock Holmes is asked to locate her. I thought it would be neat if the project essentially did the detective work. In other words, tried to locate Hattie Doran at each point in her journey. So, her story, which is told in a flashback towards the end of the story when Sherlock Holmes does his usual reveal, begins here in Maguire's cap. Where is Maguire's cap? As you can see on the map, it's this place in the middle of, if we zoom out, in the middle of Colorado. It's a former mining town. In order to find this place, and this is where the pedagogical value of the project comes in order to find these locations, students have to do their own research, trying to figure out where this spot is. They would have had to read, for example, the companion to Sherlock Holmes, to see a couple of theories about this particular location. Same thing with finding stuff in London. They would have to read historical materials about London. Essentially, the kind of work that a historical novelist might do. All right, so we begin here and we illustrate it with a black and white photograph from the United States National Archives. The Dublin core metadata that I created for this particular item is a way of citing this image. The image is in the public domain. The students have to have images that are in the public domain. I described it myself, and then I gave credit to the author of the photograph, to the publisher, the date when this was taken, and so forth. From this mining town, Hattie Doran travels to what Conan Doyle cringe-sounding calls Frisco, San Francisco. From San Francisco, she goes to London. And here I theorized that she would, rather than circumnavigate the whole American continent, she would use the transcontinental railway, which by the end of the 19th century would have been working to cut across to New York, take a ship from there, and arrive in London to St. George's Church. Again, finding St. George's Church, students would have to do a little bit of research, maybe use Google Maps, and then dig into the landscape of London here in order to find the exact spot. And to each of these spots, they're supposed to attach an item of interest. I'm now going to show you how I created the item in Omeka itself. I'm going to go back to Omeka, and I find myself in the dashboard. This is the place where you do all the control-y things inside Omeka. You can work within Neatline, and you can work within the Omeka catalog itself. Heading over to the dashboard, I have access to all of Omeka's components. Omeka has 4 basic components, I'd say. The basic unit of Omeka is the item. An item is like the catalog record of a book. It is the metadata associated with one particular artifact. So here I'm going to add an item called sample item. Omeka runs on Dublin core metadata, an internationally accepted standard metadata standard. I don't need to say this in a room full of librarians, obviously. Another thing that I don't need to say in a room full of scholars and librarians is that Dublin core is both delightfully and exasperatingly flexible. Do I hear winces? Yes. I say this as somebody who tried to crosswalk TI data, metadata, into Dublin core. It was not pretty. Anyway, so Dublin core has 15 basic fields. So it describes pretty much any kind of item, from digitized manuscript folios to ancient Greek vases. You have title, subject, description, creator, the maker of the thing, and so on. And once you've filled in all of these fields, you also have the option of attaching files. So if you have, for example, visuals, digitized images, you can attach them here. It shouldn't let me upload this, but it may. Wow, it did. Brilliant. What this is a 3D printer's file of a file for the 3D printer that would allow me to print a model of Yoda. I'm going to save this item. Anytime now, my friend. Oh yes, it is uploading the file. As you can see, slowly, slowly. Usually this is not as painfully slow. Ah yes, this is where it told me that I'm not permitted to do this. Too bad. The files that are usually permitted are things like JPEGs or certain formats of sound files or PDFs and so on. So suppose I give up on Yoda and I add my item. Here is my little sample item, and here are my students' items, illustrating, for example, Paddington Station with with a contemporary sketch of what Paddington Station was supposed to look like. Some of the action in the Sherlock Holmes stories happens around Paddington Station. They're forever jumping on trains. All right. I did not allow my students to add modern snapshots of Paddington. They had to do it the hard way. Okay, so this is one basic unit. Another unit of any Omeka site is collections. Collections are like file folders. They allow you to group items into groupings that make some sense. So for example, in this particular site, each student has their own collection where they put their own items. The next important aspect of an Omeka site is exhibits. Exhibits are Omeka's plugin for storytelling. An exhibit is basically a digital essay into which you embed your items. In this digital, so you write the narrative that guides your reader through the items, and at each item, the reader or your user, reader, audience can click on that image and drill down deeper into the metadata. Again, it's a way for the philosophy behind Omeka and Beatline to come to the fore. A philosophy that privileges closer, deeper reading rather than large amounts of data. So if, instead of writing about Sherlock Holmes on a map, I could write about Sherlock Holmes in this kind of an essay. I would create my exhibit, demo, an introduction, add a page, and within the page, yes, I'm adding blocks that allow me to do the layout of this particular piece of material. Yes, give me a file with text. Save changes. All right, so now that I've created a block is just a piece of a page, a way of laying out the exhibit. I can add an item. And I'm going to add, not the house on fire, how the engineer uses Islam, the cut-off down, surgery in the 19th century, you don't need to look at that one. All right, let's add St. George's Church. Some narrative here. Save changes. All right. Now let's see what we have wrought. Okay, so an exhibit looks like this. You begin in the beginning with an introduction, and then you have access to your page. Within a slice of the page, you have the artifact itself, and you can zoom in onto its metadata, and then you have some higher level narrative explaining these artifacts. So roughly, these are the big components of Omeka. You can make items that are records for artifacts. You can group these items into collections. You can also draw these items into text-based exhibits, multimedia essays with the items embedded like raisins in a cake. How many people here hate raisins in cakes? Yes, raisin hater, thank you. Okay. And finally, you can also take these items and present them differently, visually, by exhibiting them as I just showed you on a map. Omeka allows you all of these different views of your material as different modes of reading the same material. Last but not least, I want to show you, if you're interested, Omeka has truly excellent documentation. But if you're keen on using Omeka for pedagogical purposes, I made a site that has resources for people who are interested in Omeka in the classroom. This is an Omeka site about Omeka. It's called Omeka Gym because it's for introductory purposes. It features tutorials in PDF on Omeka and Neatline. All the material that I just showed you whooshing past is available here. It features assignments with marking schemes for Omeka work. Sample assignments that, again, I've developed in different courses. It features exercises that students can perform in order to, here we go, create your Omeka site, add an item, create a collection, add multiple items at the same time, wrangle metadata. These are different exercises that students can complete in order to master the content management system. And finally, there is also a sample exhibit. The Travels of John Mandeville. This is what an exhibit looks like when I didn't throw it together for demo purposes in 30 seconds. It has an introduction. These are all pages here. They feature narrative and they also feature manuscript pages embedded as items, each with its own descriptive metadata. So if anybody is interested in providing Omeka assignments as an alternate way into archival material, there are many beautiful pedagogical projects that use Omeka that are out there. Many of these feature collaborations between faculty and librarians. Many of them have the purpose to get students to create an archive of their own as a way of understanding how archives work, as a way of understanding the intellectual stakes in the creation and preservation of a digital archive. There are many of these beautiful assignments out there. This is one of them. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions? Yes. Yes, please.
I noticed when you were in Omeka and showing us the exhibit setup, there seemed to be a mapping feature in there. So how is that different to the Neatline mapping?
Thank you so much for your question. When I was showing you the possibilities of exhibits, when I was showing you the possibilities of the exhibit, there are two ways of mapping an item. One of them is by hand within Neatline. The other one is by giving, if you give the item itself longitude and latitude as part of its metadata, then a map can be automatically generated, placing each item, showing each item at that precise location. But what you can do within Neatline is control not just the location, which you could through longitude and latitude, but your reader's experience of it. You are the one who gets to decide how zoomed in the map is. You can actually set the zoom in Neatline. So it's the difference between the automatically generated data visualization and the visualization that you generate by hand as a form of reading. Both are fantastic. You may use each depending on your particular project's needs. Thank you for your question. Yes, of course. Hello. Sorry.
So I'm curious to know if multiple people can work on the same exhibit at the same time without messing up each other's work.
Thank you for that question. Let me show you. All right. One of the beautiful features behind Omeka is that it has user role management. If you go into the Omeka site on the dashboard, across the top, you will see users. If you are the person in charge of the site, you control who has access to your site. You can have multiple people, and each person has different levels of access. For example, somebody who is just a contributor can add and delete their own stuff, but not somebody else's. If somebody is super or admin, they are able to delete and manipulate other people's data. So theoretically, many people can work on an Omeka site and not mess up each other's work as long as the permissions are set correctly. Practically, as soon as two people have admin power, they can mess up each other's work. But what I like to do is just make all my students contributors, which gives them power over their own stuff only.
So two short questions. So I tried creating exhibit myself, and I found out if I upload multiple images, some part of image are cut off. But if you click and view the full image, one particular example is one person standing, and the hat is chopped off for the thumbnail. So is there a way to?
Yes, there is. I feel your pain. So what you want to do in exhibits, I should also say, look at me, I do have superpowers in this particular exhibit. I'm going to have to be really careful not to mess up somebody's work. If you are working in an exhibit, you're on a page, you're creating a new block, say file with text. We're going to add it. This would allow me, have you added it, my friend? Yes, here it is. Under layout options, I can choose the size of my file. So at the bottom of the block, there's a little downward arrow, there's a little arrow that says layout options. And here you can determine the file. If you have square thumbnail, which looks quite beautiful, you're going to have the head of the person chopped off. But if you have it full size or even thumbnail, you'll get a more proportional view of the image. Now, when all the items are displayed, let me show you. So what you want is thumbnail or full size. If you go to items on the dashboard and you see the list of items, these ones may have the head chopped off because by default they are shown as square thumbnails. If this is something you don't want happening, you can go to appearance up here and creatively mess with the settings.
Yeah. One last question. Thank you very much. And for the Nikon, and for the East Asian material, sometimes they have gazetteer and they have like a manually illustrated maps. So if we want to do a Nikon with that, is it possible?
If you wanted to use a map that's not georeferenced.
Not georeferenced, yeah.
Thank you for asking this. Yes. I'm a medievalist. This makes me so happy, ridiculously happy. Okay, I'm a medievalist, so we work with maps that not only are not georeferenced, they're not georeferenceable. They show paradise at the top. You can't georeference paradise. I mean, you can try, but sorry, is that just, yeah, here we go. So, what you can do in Neatline is you can do two things. There is a way to georeference maps, and add that georeference map to Neatline. So you can make your own map layer. If you don't want to mess with that, there's another thing you can do. No, not here, sorry. Medieval Paradise. Under Neatline, all right, here's the Paradise project. I'm creating my Neatline exhibit, just as I did before. I make a new exhibit, give it a title, add a narrative, and here, inside of it, instead of enabling some of the regular layers, I can choose image layer, and I can put here the URL of my image. If my image is online, I can put the URL of the image right here. You don't need to write that down. The tutorial for this is on Omeka Gym as a PDF. Okay, so here, once I've added the URL of the image, this is going to look like so. This is a medieval map of the world, a map of Mundi with paradise at the top. You can barely see Christ flanked by angels and the Last Judgment at the very top and the pointy end. This little circle is paradise, but I don't need to do that ignominious thing where I jump up. If I click on it, it's the earthly paradise. So you can similarly select areas of the image and annotate them, link items to them, just as you did on a regular map. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yes. I think there was a question here.
Okay, well, I have a very related question.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Actually, the lady was actually.
Yes, I think so, but this is a very related question. So my question is, if you have more or less georeferenceable historical map, that one that doesn't include paradise, would you be able to overlay in Neatline, overlay historical map on top of a base map? Would it be
Can you
possible?
overlay a historical map? Yes, it is possible, but it is tricky. And it involves a whole other tools. You might prefer something more robust for that. But there is an online tutorial on how you can do that if you have access to GeoServer and ArcMap and some other tools. Thank you.
Quick question is, have you tried, I don't know how to pronounce, Simile, S-I-M-I-L-E, or you choose, so you chose timeline.
Yes.
Okay, have you used Simile?
Yes, I have. I have used the timeline.
Okay.
Let me show you what it looks like. For my particular project, with Sherlock Holmes, the timeline did not make sense. But for many other mystery stories, a timeline is what you need. So let me show you how that works. All right, Neatline. All right, so this is a fake Neatline exhibit. It just says St. George's Church, Hanover Square. In its settings, I need to enable the timeline. So under widgets, I can add the timeline and save. And then no more engineer's thumb, for goodness sake. Sorry. All right, I'm going into the exhibit, and you can see the timeline at the bottom. Right? It appears here. And what I can do is I can anchor records both in space and in time. So going on the record, this is my record. There's a place called Style. Here I can add simile timeline, and scrolling down, I can decide what dates this encompasses. Let's say 2013 to 2015. And save. All right, so now when I click on this, this appears on the timeline as well. St. George's Church, Hanover Square. It shows me the span, and when I click on the timeline, this also opens up the record. So it gives me a spatial way of getting into the record, and it gives me a temporal way of getting into the record. And I had a student use the timeline brilliantly. She used Neatline to map a sex farce, one of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, in which people hop in and out of each other's beds, by accident and by accident. So she represented them as colorful dots moving across the timeline, and each of their positions was keyed to a point in the timeline. So you can actually scroll through the timeline and watch them hop in and out of each other's beds. She had a soundtrack, it was beautiful. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Sorry.
So this is very specific and hopefully quite short. I'm noticing on these maps that, you know, it's a 19th century story with Victoria's Secret on the map. Is there any way to take off modern day locations like Victoria's Secret and McDonald's and this kind of thing, or no?
Is there a way to take off modern locations? Only by georeferencing your own historical map and importing it as a spatial layer, or just importing your historical map and working on top of it. But there is no nice way of taking out, for example, Victoria's Secret. Yeah. Thank you. It's actually funny because it's a Victorian story, etc. Look, there's Starbucks and Sherlock Holmes. He might not have resorted to caffeine if he could have had a triple espresso all the time. Sorry, might not have resorted to cocaine, is what I meant. Any other questions?
This is a very simple question, but you, at the beginning you said something like, if your institution support Omeka, and I never heard of Omeka before, so I googled University of Chicago and Omeka and nothing showed up. Does that mean our institution doesn't have Omeka? And then if so, like Omeka, is it like something that institutional computer people have to authorize to download? Okay.
But, sort of. There are two flavors of Omeka. There's cheap Omeka, or rather free Omeka, which is like the IKEA version of Omeka. You can't do Neatline, but you can still make collections and exhibits. And that is at omeka.net. You don't need to buy server space, you just need to make yourself an account. It's literally one click away. You sign up here, and you have access to an Omeka site where you can add items, put them in collections, and tell stories through exhibits. Omeka Gym is built on cheap Omeka. There is fancy Omeka, and illustrated at omeka.org. This is software that needs to be downloaded and installed on a server. What usually happens is that libraries provide Omeka installations, and libraries authorize Omeka installations. This is a lot more involved on the part of involving a lot more people in the work, but it means you have access to beautiful things like Neatline. There is a final option, which is going to an internet service provider, such as Accu. AccuGIS is the one that projects that I've been involved with have used. They provide cloud hosting services, and one of the things they host is Omeka plus Neatline. These services charge, I think, for AccuGIS about $35 a month. They have a 24-hour response rate. They install everything for you. and they manage everything for you. You can just go in and build your collections. And you can use them for as long or as little as you like. You can then also export some of your data from this to a university-hosted server should that become available. Same thing for Omeka.net. The one thing you cannot export, as far as I know, is neatline stuff. So whatever records you put on the map, you can copy and paste the text from the records, and that's about it. Omeka is not a data preservation platform, but it's really handy for a quick exhibit.
Questions? Comments? So I just wanted to say that Alexandra, during her presentation, said that normally she has a much hands-on kind of approach to this type of workshop. And when she actually asked me, would you like people to do hands-on training? But because of time constraints, I kind of imposed on her the idea that she would be showing it to us, and then we could experiment on our own. So part of it is our fault, but also our time limitation. But, and the other thing that I wanted to say is that we are very fortunate to have Alexandra here today, because she is basically the leading person of digital humanities initiatives in the University of Toronto. So no better person to ask things about digital scholarship. So.
Thank you so, so much. I really, really appreciate your having me here, even though I'm just a random medievalist internal for you. Omeka Gym, if you want to get started with cheap Omeka, this tutorial right here takes you through step by step with screenshots of what you need to do. You can click on it, and there's the PowerPoint. And as you can see, it did get cut off. The image did get cut off in the quest for a beautiful square thumbnail. Anyway, thank you very much for having me here. It's been a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you.